Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. And on today's episode we're going to be taking a look at Contra 3, the Alien Wars for the Super Nintendo, developed and published by Konami and released exclusively for the system back in 1992. Bill and Lance return for another 6 stages of mayhem as we once again go against the legions of Red Falcon. This entry would also mark a few firsts for the franchise, being its inclusion of Mode 7 scaling, as well as the directorial debut of Nobuya Nakazato, who will go on to direct later entries in the series from this point forward. Before we suit up, let's check out the story real quick. In the year 2636, 2 years after the last battle with Red Falcon, Bill Reiser and Lance Bean are deployed once again to crush yet another alien threat. This time around, everything is dialed up to 11 and only you can stop the invasion. Let's prepare to attack aggressively. I remember back in the day when this released and being absolutely astonished by how much of a jump this was compared to the NES and Game Boy entries to this point. When people back in the day threw this in the Super Nintendo, you knew you were in for some breakneck level action. It also brings a heightened level of difficulty here as well off the rip, so the gloves are off on this one. Gameplay wise, you've got a mainly 2D side-scrolling run and gun game with 2 of the 6 stages being in an overhead perspective, similar to the overhead stages from Super C. The action is non-stop as soon as you hit the start button. All the conventions of Contra's past entries are here with a few new additions. Now you can hold 2 weapons at once and switch between them on the fly, and the machine gun is now the default weapon similar to Operation C for the Game Boy. There's even a fair bit of vehicle combat here by means of tank, motorcycle, and missiles. Yes, there's a good chunk of a stage where your vehicle is multiple missiles that explode. This is also arguably one of the most difficult entries in the Contra franchise next to Hardcore for the Sega Genesis, but we'll look at that one sometime in the future. Contra 3 is as much fun as it is tough, since you'll get smoked constantly until you figure out what the game is going to send your way next. Even on the easy and normal settings, if it's a first run, you're probably going to get bodied and wipe those continues out real quick. This time there's also no Konami code in any capacities, but you can adjust the number of lives from 3 to 7, and it's recommended to go with 7. Contra 3, in similar fashion to past entries, also has a good deal of platforming, as you can now climb across ceilings and the sides of walls. Aside from blasting everything that moves, you'll also need to mine the numerous gaps and pits, since the whole one hit and die rule still applies here. Enemies can literally get to you almost anywhere on the board, so quick reflexes, knowing what to expect, and sheer firepower are going to be the ticket to getting through this 6-stage gauntlet. From the occupied city to the alien hive, this one is no joke, especially on the hard mode, which is downright diabolical. Graphics wise, this, much like Castlevania 4, is a sizable jump visually compared to their NES entries, and this is still just as impressive now as it was back then. From the opening cutscene, it kicks off with one of the gnarliest game intros on the system. Characters and levels are highly detailed and has a familiar feel to the original Contra games, with a fresh coat of paint and newly imagined ideas for sprite and animation techniques based on the Super Nintendo hardware. Mode 7 is utilized a fair amount here, with 2 of the 6 stages being overhead levels with various hazards and paths, which allowed for full 360 screen rotation. Objectively, once you choose your spawn point for the overhead stages, you'll seek out and destroy several critical base points, and once cleared will activate the boss encounters. These encounters utilize Mode 7 scaling methods by rotating the boss models, as well as having one boss flying in and out of the screen's playfield, which can disorient at times since the spinning can be a little bit jarring. Level designs look stunning here, with a lot of great visual detail that's honestly easy to miss with how much is usually happening on screen at once, though Contra 3 is certainly no slouch in the optical department. Stages have a fair bit going on in the backgrounds, and a good bit of parallax scrolling every so often too. Colors are hyper bright and environments are highly detailed. These are some truly great examples of level design seen here. The highway battle section and final stage are standouts amongst the game, and every stage has some unique elements to them. Boss and enemy sprites are also a few steps forward this time around, with massive alien abominations, biomechanical and cybernetic beasts. There's also a boss fight where you jump from a helicopter to a barrage of flying warheads, which is quite the experience, and the game keeps the pace much like its visuals, high octane. The alien hive also gets an eye-catching rework and expansion leading up to the final encounters, and gives a nod to the original final battle, which is awesome to see in 16-bit. The final encounter, at least on easy and normal, also uses Mode 7 with the rotating barrier, which is also low-key RNG. Depending on which icon you break will determine the attack pattern that the boss will send at you, ranging from either a shower of power-ups and bombs to walls of spike balls and the like. Recognizing which icons do what is only going to come through repeated play and often failures until you know each possible scenario as far as attack patterns, but fret not, it can be done. If you're playing on hard mode, the final conflict will go down as you are airlifted out of the alien hive, with the boss following you up the exit, which here is pretty sick, but holy shit, it is difficult the first few times around. Sound-wise, Contra 3 is one of many iconic soundtracks for the Super Nintendo, which again, from the jump, has some belters. The first level kicks off with a hype dystopian banger, which feels like it's right out of Aliens. The soundtrack, collectively composed by Miki Hakishino, Masanori Adachi, and Tapi Iwase, is most certainly one that sticks with you once you play through the game. You'll hear a lot of it on repeat since, as mentioned earlier, this game isn't pulling any punches, but the soundtrack absolutely rips with a nice assortment of tracks. Sound effects wise, there's also some really awesome audio work here with a few noticeable revamps, such as the scream of your character losing a stock and the crunchy sounds of explosions. On the first stage, when the bomber flies through and sets a part of the level on fire, the wailing sound of the flyover to the bomb dropping all has audio cues that will stick to the memory. The game overall has some fine audio work that definitely leaves an impression once you play through it, since there's so much of it that's an elevation compared to the past entries. In closing, Contra 3 is regarded as one of the best entries in the franchise for a variety of reasons, since up to this point, the mainline games in the series were all strong, but then this first 16-bit installment was unleashed on audiences in 1992, which definitely made an impact which would soon lead to a spin-off and later sequels as time progressed. There's a lot that Contra 3 absolutely crushes, from its updated visual style, stellar soundtrack, and tight fast-paced gameplay. It's got the whole buffet for beginners to the elite, so you can pick your poison here, but be prepared for a challenge, but you'll have a good time doing it even though there are some difficult bits. Contra 3 The Alien Wars gets a 9 out of 10 and comes highly recommended to run and gun game fans as well as fans of the Super Nintendo in general, since this is one of the system's bangers amongst a heavy library of action titles. This one is a solid playthrough that definitely keeps you on your toes and dangles that carrot of seeing the true ending after finishing the game's hard mode, which is a tall order, but it's a really fun one to learn all the same, even with its at times brutal difficulty. This is available on the Super Nintendo, SNES Classic, as well as the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, along with the PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch via the Contra Anniversary Collection. There's a lot of ways to play this one nowadays, so take your pick and load up. And if you made it this far, thank you again for checking out this video. If you found these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future, but until then, stay safe out there, take it easy, and I'll see you on the next one.